In this video, I'll be covering how to optimize the security and performance of BOVPNs. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up the BOVPN gateway menu, edit one of these gateways I've already created. Pretty standard setup here. Using a pre-shared key, and if you are using that as well, it is recommended to create a key that is at least 20 characters long for security purposes. You can see here there's a maximum of 79 characters, so you can get pretty creative there. Moving into the phase 1 settings, what you're going to see here is that this is the set of defaults we have on any configuration that was created in version 12.0 and higher. The first piece you'll notice here is that it defaults to IKE v1, and IKE v1 has been around for a long time. It's not really the best performance or security these days, so that'll be the first thing we want to change. And the benefit to that is that you would not have to deal with the mode option. So this is going to go away, and then we're also going to lose the old deprecated IKE Keep Alive. We don't want that anyway. So switching over to IKE v2, this will work regardless of whether the endpoint on the other side is dynamic or static, so don't have to worry there. You're also going to get better performance in terms of rekeys and setting up the tunnel. It'll go a lot faster. And then you also get better security. And it's also just a little faster overall for the miscellaneous things. So you should notice a little bit of performance increase. You'll also see that NAT traversal and dead peer detection are both enabled by default because they are built into the newer standard. So we don't have to worry about those things. Moving down here, looking at the transform settings, again, these are our newer defaults. And these were chosen along with the IKE v1 for keeping compatibility with some of the older products while giving kind of a minimum level of security. So definitely we can improve this stuff. And the first thing I would recommend doing is changing the encryption to the AES GCM. In this case, I'm going to choose the 256-bit option because for phase 1, this isn't really where we're going to be getting a lot of performance gains. We'll look at some other settings in phase 2 to kind of help with that. Phase 1 is really just going to be for setting up the tunnel. So we can crank things all the way up here without any worries. The nice advantage to using the GCM cipher is we don't have to worry about the authentication piece at all. So you already get some overhead savings there. And then on more of the newer products, this just is going to run a bit faster anyway. And then moving down here to the key group, Diffie-Hellman group 14 is actually the minimum group today that is considered secure. If you're still using anything below group 14, all of that has been broken for years. So this is our current minimum standard, but we probably want to use something a little bit higher than the minimum here. When it gets into the upper level groups, groups 19 and 20 are both elliptic curve groups. Elliptic curve is definitely more secure than the classic mod P groups, and they also tend to be a little bit faster. So for phase 1 here, again, I'm just going to crank it up to the top. I'll use group 20, so this combo will work well for the phase 1 gateway settings. I'll go ahead and click OK, and then I'll move into the BOVPN tunnel section, and I'll edit this tunnel right here, and I'm going to head into the phase 2 settings. So again, these are the current defaults in the new configs created in version 12 and higher. And you'll notice that PFS is enabled. So I'm actually going to change this to be group 19 because again, the elliptic curve groups are going to be both faster and more secure. But because we're dealing with phase 2 settings here, this is really where we're going to see the performance gains. That BOVPN throughput is what we're concerned with here. And group 19 is going to be a little bit of a boost there, but really where we're going to see the gains is in the IPsec proposals. So the default setting here, I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And then I'm going to add one of these pre-built ones. We have one for the AES 128 GCM. And you'll notice when you select anything here, this menu down here actually updates to show you what's inside the pre-made proposal. And this is exactly what I want. The AES GCM 128 is going to give us the fastest performance. And the reason I'm using the 128 versus 256 is because AES as a cipher suite has not been compromised. But when you shrink it to the 128-bit, it's actually going to use less buffering and padding in the packets. So that way, if you're sending larger packets to the tunnel, you're not going to have as many situations where fragmentation becomes necessary to get those packets through. So that does help with the overhead and throughput there. And then if you'll notice these settings right here, you want the time option to be enabled. That's fine. But the traffic option, you would never want to enable under any circumstances. This option will actually increase the load on your firebox, but it'll decrease throughput, and it will create a situation where you're going to have more dropped packets, and you may even have the tunnel go down randomly. It also doesn't work very well with third-party stuff. So I would never recommend using this traffic option. However, if you have this really old config file that you've been migrating for years through other devices, you likely have this traffic box enabled already, because that was in the much, much older versions, basically anything created before 11.9.3. So you want to make sure you come in here and disable that traffic option, because that's probably going to be the biggest hindrance to performance. But if we use one of these new defaults, the AES GCM, this should not be here. And as long as you choose something like that with this combo, that's going to get you probably the best performance you can get on most devices. And where you're going to see the biggest gains for the AES GCM are specifically on the T55 and T70. Those two boxes did not have an IPsec crypto chip in them, so they're forced to do everything through the CPU in software mode. And the GCM will have much more noticeable gains on those two platforms.
Well, that video was really helpful. Optimizing the VPN for our new secret hideout will be a snap. Off to the server room to get started.